Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. If you are a returning visitor, you know that this is my series in which I use tarot and oracle cards to dive into topics related to living the intentional life. And this week I'd like to start with a question. Have you ever heard or said yourself things like, my higher self, my inner being, my soul, my spirit? I know I have. There's an unfortunate grammatical element in English and in other languages, it's true for Korean, I know, that whether we're aware of it or not, gives us a sense of ownership over that eternal nature of self. It's my inner being. It's my higher self. It's my soul. It's my spirit. We think that we own this non-physical nature of ours. And that's a little bit unfortunate. It gives us a confused relationship to self, the eternal self. And this week's Tarot and Oracle spread begins with asking us to reflect on that. So, the spread has been laid. Let's take a look at it. This is a gorgeous spread, isn't it? It's a beautiful spread. The cards are excellent, and if you're curious about the decks and who created them, as usual, there will be a short clip at the end of the video giving that information. And also, as usual, in the description box below, there will be information and links for you to go check out these decks on your own and purchase most of them if you are interested in them. All but one deck are currently in print. One is and has been out of print for quite a while. And I'm sorry for that. But it's a beautiful deck and it deserves being shown off and being used. So we've got the spread all laid out. And you saw that this week, as just like last week and the week before, we have a central group of 5 oracle cards. And then around those oracle cards, there are 4 inquiry cards with questions. And those questions are each answered by 1 card each from 2 different decks of tarot cards. So we've got it all laid out. You took a peek at it. Let's take a close look at the central oracle cards first. If you are a regular visitor here, you know that every new moon I switch out my cards and my spread changes a little bit depending on the cards that I'm using. The cards often teach me how they want to be laid out in a spread. So for this cycle of the moon and for these decks, for this combination of decks, the central oracle cards have been a kind of alchemical spread of 5 elements. And if you have missed the last 2 videos in this series, I recommend going to look at them because I think they're informative and helpful. But let me give you a brief explanation of the oracle section for this spread, if this is your first time. So, like I said, it's based on an alchemical idea of 5 elements. Now, we know for 4, most of us know of 4. There's fire, water, air, and earth. But there's also a 5th element of ether, which correlates to spirit. So ether for spirit, fire for passions, creativity, water for emotions and the unconscious, air for thoughts and mind and vision and communication, and earth for the material, our physical bodies, the work that we do in this physical realm. So we've got 5 cards laid out: fire, water. To me, the left, this is where my left is, air and earth. And so I'm going to read these oracle cards as they relate to each element. And we're going to start with the central card, ether, for spirit. And this is a little bit of a difficult card to see, I believe, because the image is not very clear. I'll say it. This image in this deck is not the clearest of them all. It distracts you from the main element of the image, which is, did you see it? There's a little dog lying down at the bottom of the screen, of the card. And the element that this represents is Rotgenium. Rotgenium. That's the name of it. Rotgenium. And it's an element that was created and named after a German physicist. Rotgenium is not found in nature, or hasn't been found in nature. It has only been created in a lab, and it's highly radioactive. And the meaning of Rotgenium in this deck is separation from nature and our nature. We modern human beings have separated ourselves greatly from nature. And I think most of us recognize that. I think most of us that are here watching this video and participating in this video recognize that very clearly. Yeah? And so many of us deliberately go out to interact with nature, to be with nature, to find healing and find restorative energy in nature. Do you do that? Do you go out into nature? Do you hike? Do you go to the ocean? Do you interact with plants? Have you brought plants into your home? Have you deliberately reestablished or strengthened your connection to nature? If you have, that's wonderful. But many people have not. And fewer people do. And more people will complain about having to interact with nature. Yeah, bugs, dirt, things like that. So this card reminds us of our separation from nature. It's a card of the captured, civilized, domesticated pet. And how does that relate to spirit? In just a little while ago, I asked you about how you express the idea of inner self or inner being, higher self. Do you say, like I often do, my higher self, my soul? That addition of the word my indicates ownership. And we get this idea that we own our souls, we own our spirits, we own our higher self. It's not only an ownership relationship, but one in which we have domesticated our spirits, our higher selves, our inner beings. The relationship has, for many of us, turned upside down. Rather than understanding that we are expressing ourselves into this conscious mind, and that the we who is expressing ourselves into this conscious mind, this ego, is the eternal, non-physical self. But our egos have domesticated it, have made it part of our conscious construct of self, which is backwards, it's upside down. Rotgenium, I'm sorry, this word is not coming out of my mouth right now. Rotgenium is the card of also worshiping the new hero gods, of technology perhaps, or cultural icons? Where do we put our attention and our love? Are we putting it all on our gadgets, on the things that we have accumulated and that we use and depend upon? Are we putting it on people we idolize, whether they are singers or actors or athletes or pure people in the spiritual community, or our priests, or our images of what we think of as the divine creator, Gaia, great mother, great father, God, Brahman? A lot of us, whether we know it or not, have also domesticated the creative divine, creating divine. And that relationship is, again, topsy-turvy. I'd like to suggest that we, from this point forward, try to correct that way of expressing our understanding of the eternal nature of self. That we eliminate those possessive pronouns when we express those things. Rather than my higher self, my inner being, my soul, we could just try dropping the pronoun, the possessive pronoun. Higher self says, higher self relates to me. Eternal nature expresses through me. That, I think, would re-inform us of the correct relationship of who we are. If anyone is to own anything, higher self owns ego. So my ego makes sense because the ego is part of a construct within the higher self, which is who we are. So my ego makes sense. My unconscious makes sense. The unconscious of me, I, who is otherwise described as higher self, inner being, soul, spirit. Does that make sense to you? However, we also recall that sometimes we slip. We start claiming ownership of spirit. So what does that do for us? Or how does that influence us? Or how does that affect us? Well, our relationship is catawunkus, as some people say. And it also puts other parts of us, rather than the servants of self, as the influencers of self, or influencers of our consciousness. Rather than living as self, emanating into this physical realm and living in love and joy and well-being and pure awareness that we are. Our fears, our worries start to take over. And perhaps the first area of takeover might be the area of fire, our passions. When I was studying the Thoth deck, I rearranged the elements in my mind. And it makes sense to me that we begin with fire as the beginning of all physical nature. Now, we begin with fire. And from fire, we move into water because they're partners. And then from fire and water, air comes. And then from the three of those, we get earth. So for me, and I do not believe that, I do not believe that non-physical, that spirit, that whatever we want to call that element, God, higher self, all of that. There's no hierarchy there. It's all a oneness. There's no higher, lower, first, last, next. It's all eternal and it's all the same. There's homoousis. Yeah, the same stuff. When we get into matter, the physical realm, then we start getting hierarchies. So that's where we can start thinking of the hierarchy of perhaps fire, then water, then air, then earth. You might think of it differently, but that's how I'm going to express this idea. So let's start with fire, the first emanation. And fire, we get the card of, this is also an element that I'm not used to saying, yeah, it's astatine. Astatine showed up in the fire position. And astatine is an element in this deck which is an element that appears and disappears. It appears and disappears. It shows up and then it fades away. And then it shows up and it fades away. It has its own kind of reincarnation. And I think our fire, our passion, our creativity follows that. Now, our creativity is not a plane that just keeps going, nor is it one that continues going up without pause. Have you noticed that for yourself? That you get these creative bursts, and then there are times of rest, of slowness, of perhaps even recovery, and then there's another burst of creativity, another burst of passion. So it appears and then it disappears, and then it appears and it disappears, and it is reincarnated in its own new way. And it's reincarnated in its own new way because it evolves. This is also a card of always evolving. So it appears, and the next time it appears again, it's in an evolved state, and then it disappears, and then it appears again in a more evolved state. And our passions do that. We learn from past experience. Our creativity grows over time in this physical realm. And actually, I believe spirit also evolves, but definitely the physical realm evolves, as do our passions, our desires, our interests. It's a card of imagination. And that's part of our fire, I believe. Now, intuition is water. Fire is imagination. Now, air is also imagination. We can bring that there too. But I usually think of air as more rational thought. Fire is that inspired imagination. It's fire moving through the darkness. That's what this element is. Now, I want to also mention here that I think that many or most of us are light addicts. And I noticed that a lot around the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. A lot of people start complaining about the long nights and they want longer days. We equate darkness and blackness with evil, and I think that is a very unfortunate association. There is beauty and there is love and there's creativity in the dark. Seeds buried in the darkness of earth germinate and grow. They grow into the light, but if there weren't that darkness, they wouldn't grow. The darkness is a womb of care and love and nurturing. And sure, babies after 9 months or so struggle to get their butts out of the womb, but without the womb, there would be nothing to come out. Yeah, darkness is beautiful. Darkness is love. Darkness is embrace. Darkness is comfort, gentleness. And that's what darkness is. So our fiery passion within that darkness of comfort and love and generation. That's what the fire element is. And that's what this is reminding us of. That because of our perhaps misaligned relationship with the eternal nature of self, when that fire seems to go out, when our creativity seems to disappear for a while, we start getting anxious. We start getting worried. We start thinking, oh my God, am I ever going to have another inspired thought? Am I ever going to make another work of art, another creation? Am I ever going to have sex again? If we run into a dry spell, am I ever going to have sex again? Am I ever going to have sexual relations again? We start getting those fears, and then we perhaps start thinking, well, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so then we start limiting ourselves. Has that ever happened to you? Have you noticed it happening to other people and you felt, well, that's too bad? That fire of creation is still in there, but it's being covered up by other things like worry and disappointment and other resistant ideas and resistant feelings. But if we get back into right relationship with spirit, with higher self, all of that resistance can go away. Now let's move on to water, the partner of fire. Now, a lot of people say water and fire, they don't mix, they are opposites, but they are partners. They're partners that dance around each other when in right relationship. They balance each other out. And emotion, subconsciousness, is the water element. And for the water element, we get something called chlorine. You know chlorine. And what better element for water? Yeah, chlorinated water in swimming pools. I thought that was kind of funny. So we've got chlorine for water. And chlorine, whether you know it or not, is a volatile element. It's erratic. So are our emotions, especially when our relationship with spirit is catawonkus, is bass-ackwards. When we are in good, right relationship with spirit, when spirit is flowing through us and we identify with that eternal self, we don't get that erratic nature in our emotional lives nearly as much. There will be highs and lows, certainly, but there won't be highs and lows and highs and lows. They'll soften out and they'll be moved up towards the higher end of the emotional spectrum. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with having low negative emotions. There is nothing wrong with experiencing a roller coaster. Sometimes that roller coaster can be fun. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's agonizing. And sometimes we need to get help. Yes. But some people get a kick out of the roller coaster of emotions. And that's cool. But it's not necessary. Our emotions are volatile sometimes. It's also the card of the elusive, sublime youth, the mystic, the mystic ingénu, the fresh, vibrant, connected to spirit, feeling being. Do you remember being that as a child? I remember it very clearly. I'm trying to remember how to get back to it. And I get there sometimes. Back to that fresh feeling of being spirit in a human body. And that mystical feeling, that feeling of magic everywhere. And sometimes that can be easier to reconnect with, to open ourselves up to in this time of holidays. When I'm filming this just a couple of days before Christmas for me. This is also the season of Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Yule, many holidays around this season. And a lot of people feeling more festive, more generous, more spiritually vibrant than usual. So this is a time for many, not for all, because for many of us also, this is a time of great pain and depression. The holidays can be painful times for many of us because of life circumstances and because of restrictions, physical and emotional and perhaps even mental. Now, we're not all vibrant, happy people around the holidays. And we want to remember those of us who are not and feel for them, care for them, have compassion, reach out to them as much as they are willing to accept. So at this time, for many of us, and perhaps you who are watching this, feel more of a sense of spiritual vibrancy at this time. But then we also know that right after January 1st for many of us, or maybe a little bit later, maybe some of us go past into Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day in the United States or Valentine's Day, and then there's a crash, which is the other side of this volatile nature of chlorine. Yeah? The elusive, mystical youth on one side, and then the vengeful demon of death and destruction on the other. Our emotions have both sides, and that's what this chlorine is telling us, reminding us of. That we have that youthful ingenue of the mystic, and then we have the destructive demon of death on the other side. And all of that is within all of us. All of us. The question is, where are we going to place our attention? And when that volatile demon of death and destruction arises within us, what are we going to do? How are we going to interact with that? Are we going to express it? Are we going to take it out on other people? Or are we going to manage it or work with it in another way? Are we going to learn how to move ourselves in another direction? With spirit flowing through us, that demon doesn't make as big of an impact in our lives. It could just be a quick little flash and it's gone. The chlorine card is also the idea of bliss and torment and loss being a spectrum that we can be anywhere on at any given moment of any day. And with practice, with understanding, perhaps with some help, we can be farther away from loss and torment and closer to bliss more of the time. However, when our relationship with spirit is upside down, we're often bouncing from one end to the other. Perhaps uncontrollably. Perhaps allowing our environment and everything around us to influence us as to where we're going to be on that emotional scale. And then we put the blame on everything around us. It's your fault. It's the fault of this. It's the fault of that. And it doesn't have to be that way. Let's move on to air, mind. We get iron for air, for mind, which is wonderful because when we think of air for the tarot, we think of the card of the suit of swords. And steel is one way, one material to make swords out of, but also iron was used for making swords. before we had the technology for steel. There was bronze, and then there was iron. Iron for air, I think, is a perfect card. And this is the card of an element that has muscled his way into extreme influence. And what better card for mind for this day and age? Our minds are glorious, wonderful things. They help us to live in this world of social interactions, of material to manipulate, to think about, to explore, to communicate. But mind has muscled its way to the fore as ego. And it's from that stance that we get the idea of ownership of spirit. I am I, and I have my higher spirit, and it better listen to me. I have my inner being, and it better be good to me. It better follow my instructions, because I am I. Total ego. It's the card of control over its realm, which is what ego wants to do. Control, either positively or sometimes negatively. Control with fear, control with anxiety, control with anger. Those are tools that ego uses to control its domain, to protect itself from dissipation, from being ignored, from being seen as less than higher self, inner being, soul, spirit. It's the card of when relationship is proper, correct restraint that can be used for antecedent change. Okay, I'm looking at my notes and I'm having a hard time remembering what I wrote here. Correct restraint can be used for ascendant change. That's what I wrote. Ascendant, antecedent, ascendant change. Our minds can be used for those things. Our minds can be used for our own evolution, for our own development. The development of our physical manifestation in this physical universe. But there needs to be correct relationship for that to happen. And if not, we enter the realm of ravages and annihilation, where mind tries to take control, tries to annihilate spirit, and wreaks havoc in our lives often. Wreaks havoc because it's not as developed. It's only a physical construct within this physical reality. It doesn't have the deep wisdom and understanding and compassion of self, of the eternal self. It's much more limited. And it's frightened of things like the subconscious, the collective conscious. It gets scared of those things because it sees its shadow self, it sees the monsters within itself reflected to itself. And so it tries to fight even harder as iron. However, again, iron can also be a very useful tool as long as it knows that it's not in charge. Iron is not in charge of us, we are in charge of iron. Now, I don't know if you've heard this, but guns don't kill people, people kill people. Now, of course, it's not the gun that is to blame, it's the people who use the gun. Same thing with our minds. The mind isn't to blame, it's how we use the mind. And we use it properly when we are in right relationship with higher self, with eternal self. When we're not in right relationship with that, when we've placed the ego above that as the dominant element of our lives, then that iron turns into a very destructive weapon, much of the time. Now we move into earth. Earth. For earth, we get oxygen, which is a surprise, frankly. We think of oxygen for air, and maybe iron for earth. But oxygen, this is where we get the chance to reconnect. Because remember, we are eternal, non-physical beings here expressing in this physical realm for a reason. We came here to explore, to evolve, to expand, to understand. And oxygen is our way perhaps to wake up to the reality of us being non-physical in a physical body. Oxygen is the card of the element of love. It's the element of breath. And what better way to reconnect with spirit, with self, with higher self, with inner being, than with breath. That's one of the most common, most accessible forms of meditation for most people. Breath meditation, placing attention on the breath. And in meditation, we can move past those boundaries of ego and realize that we are the ones who are observing ego. And then we are the ones who are observing the observer of ego. Oxygen, the card of connection. Oxygen in this physical realm, especially on this planet, is everywhere. It's under the water, it's in the earth, it's in the atmosphere. Oxygen is everywhere. It's connectivity. So is spirit. Spirit is everywhere. It is connectivity. So that reflection of spirit in oxygen helps us to wake up. It's the card of unification because of that connectivity. It's the card of joy, of exaltation. Now, when we've got a lot of oxygen in our systems, our emotions rise. Our endorphins rise. The good of our endorphins. The ones that we want. The oxytocin, the dopamine, the serotonin. And then when we start using up our oxygen, then we move into that fight, flight, freeze state, and the not so happy hormones start springing into our bloodstreams. But a nicely oxygenated bloodstream is able to flow happy hormones. And so that's what, and then when those happy hormones are flowing, we're so much easier to understand and feel the connection with the higher self, the inner being that we are. And so oxygen can remind us to get back into right relationship with spirit. Not even right relationship with spirit, right relationship within self. Re-identifying ourselves as the non-physical, as the eternal, higher being. And I don't like the word higher, the eternal being. I don't like the word higher because higher implies lower, and there's no hierarchy in the non-physical. So, eternal being. Oxygen reminds us of that correct understanding of self and helps us to feel that. and helps us to also get the other elements back into right relationship, I believe. When we feel that love, when we feel that joy, the fire, the water, and the air all lighten, become freer and more joyful, and in right relationship to the eternal self. Does that make sense? I think this is a wonderful thing for us to remember now during this holiday season. Happy holidays, and always. Especially when we leave the holiday season. And a lot of us who had been on a high crash. Well, friends, we've got 4 questions to ask of this central spread. Let's move on to the first question. The first question is, what am I ready for? Wonderful question. What are we ready for? After we've considered the relationship of us to us, what are we ready for? And we've got 2 wonderful cards answering this question, and I think perfect cards. On one side, we've got the World card from the Pagan Otherworlds deck, and on the other side, we have the Knight of Cups from the Hoods Tarot. And I think these work beautifully together. Now, the Pagan Otherworlds World card is very simplified. Now, usually in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we've got the dancing figure in the center, looking rather female, with a wreath around her. And around that wreath, there are 4 creatures. Could be the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. They could be the 4 cherubs, seraphim. They could be the 4 evangelists in the the Christian Bible. Could be the 4 elements. There are many ways to interpret those 4 creatures around the dancing world card, the dancing figure in the wreath. And this card we got perhaps an older image. Now, pre-Rider-Waite-Smith, pre-even Tarot de Marseille, perhaps from the Italian decks, where we've got an angel figure just standing up on top of the world. Beautiful, beautiful card. Beautiful card. Simpler card. It's a card of fulfillment. It's a card of completion and consummation. And those are very different words if we think about them. So what am I ready for? I'm ready for fulfillment. I'm ready to feel fulfilled in the world. And to feel fulfilled, we really want to have connection with, or we want to experience ourselves as spirit in a physical body. I want completion, not endings. There are no endings. There's no finish line. There's no real death, especially when we think of ourselves as eternal beings having this experience. So it's not that kind of completion. It's finishing projects, moving on to the next thing, completing a cycle that started, we started and we finish, and we started and we finish, that kind of completion. And not around a fixed point, but more like a cycle in a spiral. The way the earth revolves around the sun, but the sun is also moving. So it goes like this, like this, like this. Yeah? That kind of spiraling cycle. That kind of completion of evolution as well as cyclical. Consummation. A consummation devoutly to be wished. Yeah? Something being created. Something being merged. Oh, I'm sorry. Consummation devoutly to be wished is from Shakespeare, and I'll put a line below where it's from. It's just something that sprang to my mind. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. I think it's Midsummer Night's Dream, but I'll check. Anyways, moving right along to what am I ready for? I'm also ready for integration. That's what the World card can remind us of. Integration. We are not separate. There's not this spirit thing, and then there's this ego thing, and then there's this body thing. They're not three or more separate things. It's an integrated being of non-physical entering into the physical realm and creating self in physical form. There's no separation that needs to be hurdled. There's actually no enlightenment to be gained. Enlightenment is not something you gain. It's not something you become. It's something you are. You were from the moment you were born. You were an enlightened being, and you are an enlightened being. We just got to recognize it. We just want to realize it. So it's a reminder that we're ready to feel that integration that we are. It's a card of accomplishment. And we love feeling that. Feeling of accomplishment, of having accomplished, having done stuff in the world. Because that's part of the joy of being here in this physical plane. Doing stuff and accomplishing stuff, creating stuff. And that stuff could be anything. It could be a relationship. It could be a work of art. It could be plastic arts, like theater or song, performance arts. It could be a physical object of like a tool. It could be food. It could be, what else can we accomplish? Getting a job, a new home, or a clean home. We can accomplish so many things, and we love that, and we're ready for that. And it's also the card of masterpiece, which is part of that accomplishment idea, but also recognizing that you are a masterpiece. Do you know that? You are a masterpiece. I am a masterpiece. All those people we love are masterpieces. All those people we hate are masterpieces. All those people we fight against are masterpieces. We are all masterpieces. Now, this isn't saying that there's a moral equivalency, that some masterpieces do things that they shouldn't, that are destructive, and they are best to be treated in some way. But they themselves are masterpieces suffering in some way. So the next card is the Knight of Cups. And I love the Knight of Cups in this deck. Did you notice him? He's got his helmet on. He's got some armor. He's holding a cup. It's a very close-up image of the Knight of Cups. There's no horse. But inside of the cup, you noticed it was blue. If you look carefully inside of that cup, it looks like there's a reflection of a map, of a globe, in the water, in the cup, which I think is perfect here, especially for this pairing of the world and the Knight of Cups. The Knight of Cups is the card of creativity and imagination. And I'm ready for that. We're ready for that. Our creativity and our imagination to burst forth from us. It's a card of romance and beauty. And we're ready for that. It doesn't matter what numerical age we place on our bodies, we're ready for that, if we allow ourselves to be ready for it. And it doesn't have to be romance with somebody new. It could be a romance with a 50-year-long relationship, refreshed every moment of every day. It's a card of charm and affability, of being able to relate with different people charmingly, winning over the appreciation of others. And we're ready for that kind of interaction, that playful interaction. And again, because the globe is reflected in this cup, we're ready for that. The emotional, global sensation of being all-encompassing spirit in this physical realm, in relationship to the world card. Because that sense of accomplishment and fulfillment without the love, creativity, imagination, and beauty of this Knight of Cups, it's a dry, barren kind of completion, kind of accomplishment. So both of these together create a beautiful, integrated feeling of love, creativity, passion, and fulfillment, and all of that stuff that we're ready for. And we can feel all of that when we are in correct relationship with self. Let's move on to the second question. This second question is perfect. We move from what am I ready for to what am I looking for? So I'm ready for this stuff, but what am I really looking for now? And what do we get? We get sorry, it's a little cold in here. We get the 3 of Wands and we get the 4 of Pentacles. Now 3, 4, nice combination, nice series. 3 of Wands. Here we see no human figures. We just see the wand stuck in the ground, and we see the view of the ocean and some ships. The 3 of Wands is the card of expansion and progress. That's what we're looking for. Now we're ready for accomplishment, we're ready for fulfillment, but we're looking for expansion. Because, again, there's never any endedness to anything. Really. So that fulfillment is not an end. That accomplishment is not an end. It's a stage of our continued expansion and our continued progress, and that's what we're looking for, the 3 of Wands. It's a card of the adventurous course. We're looking for a little bit of adventure. We are. We really, really, really are. Do you notice that for yourself? That adventure excites us, delights us, gives us more energy, stokes our inner fires. Now, adventurous course doesn't necessarily mean reckless or crazy, but adventurous, doing something a little bit beyond what we're used to, which is part of that expansion and progress. Yeah? The adventure of stepping outside of our comfort zone, stepping outside of what we're used to. Not necessarily into discomfort, but into adventure. It's a card of action from intention. Living an intentional life. This is all 3 of Wands. Yeah? We move with the powerful flow of intention. And we act from that. Now, the intentional life is not a passive life. Now, it's not sitting in a rocker in your living room. It's creating. It's moving forward. It's doing stuff. Because if we didn't want to do stuff, we wouldn't need a body. We wouldn't have come into one. We wouldn't have created a body for ourselves. So, living an intentional life is one of action from intention, with intention, in the direction of intention. Harnessing the powerful energy of intention. It's the card of foresight as well. Now, if we're open to the current of intention, we can see where we're going more clearly. And most often, foresight is, and when we think of vision, seeing where we're going, seeing into the future, we think more of the sword suits than the wand suits. This is not the the planning, seeing the big picture kind of foresight. This is anticipation of what is to come. That more fire, passion, creativity kind of foresight. It's also the card of productivity or productivity, depending on your preferred pronunciation. Productivity. Doing stuff. Again, with the powerful force of intention. So that's what we're looking for. That excitement. Evolving, growing a little bit, just beyond what we're used to. And then on the right, we have the Four of Pentacles, which in many decks is a card of greed and miserliness, and that can be an aspect of this card. But I would only read that meaning into the card if it were reversed. For me, the Four of Pentacles upright is a card of stability. It's a card of frugality, not miserliness, not being afraid to spend money or hoarding money and being afraid of loss, which is miserliness and greed. Now that's very resistant, but a healthy frugality, not being overly extravagant. Spending money where it wants to be spent, but doing it thoughtfully, mindfully. It's the card of saving money, which is different from hoarding money. Saving money so that you can use it at some time. Not saving money so that we are impressed by our own numbers, but saving money for use. Security, having a stable platform of resources to live from. Those are things we're looking for. It's a card of conservatism, but not conservatism like the political opposite of liberalism. The conservatism of taking care of stuff. Taking care of the planet is conservatism. And conservatives often do not conserve the planet. A lot of politically conservative people are some of the greatest offenders of overuse. Interesting irony. But conservatism of taking care of the stuff we have, the houses we have, the material objects we have, our environment, our bodies. That's all conservatism. And control. Not dictatorship, not the control of ego, but control of the direction we're going in. Control of the work that we're doing. Keeping a good schedule. That kind of control. So we want both of these, and both of these in combination, I think, give us a good life plan. And that's what we're looking for. We want the stability. We want to conserve what we have. We want to have a stable platform to leap from with the Three of Wands and evolve and progress and discover with a good home base to return to and then leap off of again and bring forward with us. So what better pairing for this question? What am I looking for? I'm looking for progress and evolution and creativity and foresight and stability. Well-grounded, well-founded platforms for me to leap from, routines for me to work within and work from, and leave sometimes and return to. So these two questions and two sets of answers, I think, were perfect, especially in relationship to this question of how do we see ourselves? Ourselves. Not ourselves, but ourselves. Let's look at the third, wow, my fingers are really frozen. The third question. The third question, what are my boundaries? Was a little bit surprising at first, but now I kind of understand it better after pondering this spread a little bit. What are my boundaries? So, what am I ready for? What am I looking for? But remember, we also want that Four of Pentacles stability. And that Four of Pentacles stability includes some boundaries. Permeable boundaries. We want to let stuff in and let stuff out, but we still want to have healthy boundaries, healthful boundaries to an extent. Not out of fear, not out of defensiveness, but for organization. Let's say for organization, and to allow ourselves to direct our attention away from things that we don't need to place our attention on. We don't want to be so open consciously that we're trying to take care of the entire world. That's too big of a burden for this human brain. So for our human brains, we want to have some boundaries so that we can shift our attention where it best suits us and where we can most gain from, grow from. So what are my boundaries? We have two cards here. We've got one more Cups card and one more Pentacles card. Now we got the Eight of Cups. Again, was a surprising card for this question to me. It made me wonder, what the heck is the tarot trying to say? Eight of Cups I usually think of as leaving things behind. How is that a boundary? And in this card, what do we see? We see the Eight Cups floating up in the air, and we see a moonish, sunnish figure, celestial orb with a face, looking a little bit sadly towards the rocks, I guess. And I guess the rocks could be a kind of boundary. And the Eight of Cups is a card of disappointment, of abandonment, in two respects. The abandonment of feeling abandoned, that can be part of this, but also of abandoning, leaving things behind. Things that are no longer serving us, things that are perhaps even have become toxic to us. Leaving those things behind, not dragging them along with us, not dragging a toxic relationship along with us or a toxic memory along with us, being able to leave that stuff behind, being able to abandon things to the past. It's the card of both withdraw and moving on. Withdraw from things that we no longer want to associate with, and moving on. It's a card of detachment. And that's a kind of boundary, isn't it? That space between us and what we are leaving behind. That's a kind of boundary. It creates a space between, allowing us to move forward, hopefully. Well, we're always moving forward. There's no return to the past. We're always moving forward in the eternal now. And we're allowing space. That space of letting things go into the past is a kind of creation of a boundary. Does that make sense? A boundary of space, of time, of decreased attention. That decreased attention can be a kind of boundary. It can be a boundary, a negative boundary in a relationship. But it can also be a helpful boundary when we turn our attention from the things that have or that are causing negative emotions and negative feelings and negative thoughts within us. Yeah? Because the solution is not found in the problem. The problem points to the solution, but the solution is not found in the problem. We want to turn our attention from the problem to a solution, and that's a kind of boundary and a kind of moving beyond. So the card beside it is the Ten of Pentacles. Beautiful card. What do we see here? We see, looks like a small nuclear family unit. It looks like a, I'm going to go gendered here, I'm very sorry, but it looks like a daddy unit, a mommy unit, and a baby unit. Underneath an arch, and on those arch there, and on that arch are pentacles. Now, pentacles are on the arch. There are 10 of them. And instead of being like in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck in the shape of the tree of life, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, these are just spread out in a balanced way above the arch. And this is the card of wealth, of financial security, and that's a kind of boundary, I guess, from lack, from the fears of lack and deprivation. It's the card of stability, again, reminding us of that 4, wanting stability. It's a card of family. And when we indicate family, that's a kind of boundary. This is family, that is not. And hopefully our families can be a little bit more inclusive. There can be walls to the castle. Now there's the inner wall, and then there are outer walls and outer walls and outer walls that include more people. And maybe those walls aren't actual walls, but spaces of limit, where some people are allowed in closer and some people are in a little bit farther out, and some people are still in relation, in familial relation, the human family, but a little bit farther out, and there are others that are farther out. Those are kinds of boundaries as well. It's the card of long-term success. Is that a boundary? If you can figure out, if you can see how long-term success might be a boundary, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It's the card of contribution and ancestry, because the Ten of Pentacles to me is also, I've got my stuff secure enough that I can trust it will still be with me. I don't have to work to gather more for myself, and I'm now able to share and to move on, to take care of others. So first there's that boundary of what I need for my stability, and then what I can start giving out to others. And there are gradations of those boundaries. Yeah? There's me in this physical body that needs a certain number of resources. And then there are the people in close relationship with me and the resources that we need. And then there's the next level of relational interaction, and that group of people and the resources that I can share with those. Now, there are a series of boundaries that are porous, perhaps. So I think that's what these two cards are trying to tell us, the boundary of time and the boundary of relationship. Those are my boundaries. The boundary of separation of time and separation of attention, and the boundary of relationship. Who is in what level of interaction with me. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments below. Let's move on to the fourth question. The fourth and last question is, what am I in the middle of? We've got a wonderful progression here. We started off with, what am I ready for? And then we moved into, well, what am I looking for? Looking out. And then, but okay, what are my boundaries? And now, in my boundaries, what am I in the middle of? What's going on here, right? So the King of Wands is the first answer, and the Ace of Pentacles is another. We've got Pentacles and Cups all over this. We've got Pentacles, we've got Wands, and we've got Cups. A nice balance of those three. We don't have air. We don't have swords. And perhaps because the swords are often the trouble spot for us when it comes to relationship with the eternal self. Because the sword's the mind, we get into that ego space and shut down, shut in. So this spread is trying to remind us to reconnect with our fire, our water, and our earth. And so the King of Wands, the card of the natural born leader, grand visions. Again, not the vision of the swords, but the visions, the inspired visions of what I want to do. Of the Wands. Long-term success again, repeated here. Now, an element from the Ten of Pentacles is repeated here in the King of Wands. Long-term success. The noble heart. The honest one. That's what I am in the middle, whether I'm aware of it or not. Because that is my being. The first emanation of self into the physical is that King of Wands. We are all natural born leaders when we are born. We have grand visions. And most of us maintain them through our youths. We have visions of long-term success. We let go of those visions of long-term success. We let go of our grand visions, unfortunately, but we were born with them and born developing them. And that's what we are in the middle of, though we are often resistant to that self, those characteristics of self. And we are noble. That's who we are. That's who we were born as. We are honest, and we were born that way. Have you ever seen a dishonest baby? We learn to be dishonest to protect ourselves from real or imagined dangers. But that's not who we are. That's a learned behavior. And that's what we are in the middle of, our honesty, our nobility. But just like a baby, the King of Wands can also be demanding. And that's something we want to be aware of. Now we want to embody our King of Wands, the leader, the honest, noble leader with grand vision and understanding of long-term success, not immediate success, but long-term success, without being demanding, without trying to control other people. We can influence them, we can work with them. All of this universe is a co-creation. It's not a co-demanding, it's a co-creation. So we want to be really careful of slipping into the negative side, of the shadow side of the King of Wands, and becoming demanding of stuff, of people, of God, Gaia, Great Spirit, Brahman, Allah, Divine Mother. And the next answer is the Ace of Pentacles. Beautiful card. Beautiful card. New opportunity. Whether we are open to it or not, we are always in the middle of a new opportunity. Manifestation. These bodies do not manifest themselves. We are constantly manifesting these bodies and the universe. We are constantly manifesting this universe. By our presence, by our observation, by our attention. We, not me, we are always in the middle of manifesting this physical universe. We are in the middle of abundance. The Ace of Pentacles is abundance. It's a seed of abundance, but it's abundance. And it's the card of financial gain. To one extent or another, it's the card of financial gain. So that's what we're in the middle of. We're in the middle of being the long-term, passionate, natural-born leader, creators, and opportunities, if we are open to them. And that's all we need to do, is open ourselves to our natural spirit, our natural sense, our natural being. To realize who we are and the powerful flow of intention that we are following. The times that we do not recognize opportunities are not the times when opportunities are not present, but when we have closed our eyes, when we have put up resistance. No, it can't happen this way. It has to manifest this way, not that way. I need to go this way, not that way. When we put up resistance and barriers, not healthy boundaries, but boundaries of fear, of anger, of resistance. We are in the middle of our honest, noble selves, surrounded by abundance and opportunities, if we allow ourselves to recognize it and to be open to it. And so that's why, as we move from that beginning of, are we really in right relationship with ourselves, with the greater, higher, eternal selves? And some of the traps when we're not. And when we are, what we are ready for. What are we looking for? And even with fully embodied spirit, there will be boundaries because of our capacities as physical beings. And then what are we in the middle of? In the middle of these boundaries, we're in the middle of so much wonderful stuff. Wonderful experiences, wonderful relationships, wonderful opportunities. It's all here. Wherever we are. Wherever we are. So friends, what do you think? Let me know. Remember, in just a moment, there will be a short clip about the decks and the creators. Also information below. And hit the like button if you got something out of this. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and hit the alarm bell so you get notification of when I upload videos. Share this with somebody who you think might be uplifted by it or feel healing from it. And comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. How do you see your relationship with yourself? With self. Yeah, it's not yourself, it's self. How do you see relationship with self? And friends, now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.